It doesn't hit them when you leave. It never does. It hits when your absence finally stops feeling like a pause and starts feeling like a reality. When the silence stretches too long to be pride, too consistent to be manipulation, too calm to be pain. When they finally feel for the first time what life actually sounds like without your presence humming in the background. See, in the beginning, they don't notice your absence because they've grown addicted to your consistency. They believe your care is permanent, your attention is guaranteed. They think they can wound you and still find you waiting. That's the illusion most people live under. That devotion means dependency. But your silence breaks that illusion. At first, they confuse your distance with emotion. They think you're playing a game, trying to get a reaction, trying to make a point. They underestimate you because they're used to a version of you that needed to be heard, needed to be seen, needed to explain. But now, your silence isn't reaction, it's revelation. It's not a performance, it's the truth, raw and unspoken. And that truth hits differently. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, it's haunting, because your absence doesn't shout, it lingers. It follows them into their quiet moments, into their mornings when they reach for their phone, into their nights when they scroll, pretending not to notice that your name is missing from their notifications. They'll tell themselves they're fine, they'll tell their friends they don't care, but they'll feel it, in the pit of their chest, in that space where your energy used to live. It begins as confusion. He's quiet. Why hasn't he said anything? Then turns into curiosity. Is he ignoring me? Has he met someone else? And then, slowly, it becomes unease, because the silence that once gave them control now exposes their own emptiness. And for the first time, they realize that your presence wasn't just convenient, it was grounding. It brought peace to their chaos, warmth to their pride, and reflection to their shadows. And now, with you gone, they can feel the absence of all of it. The tone in the room changes. The air feels heavier. Their laughter doesn't hit the same. They replay old conversations, looking for signs that you still cared, that you'd still come back. But they find none, because you didn't leave to prove something. You left because there was nothing left to prove. That's what makes this moment so powerful. They finally understand the difference between attention and energy. Attention is cheap. It can come from anyone. But energy, real energy, is rare. It leaves fingerprints that can't be erased. And once it's gone, no imitation feels right. They'll search for replacements. They'll look for distractions. They'll seek validation elsewhere, but nothing will feel the same, because what you gave wasn't validation. It was presence, real presence, grounded, masculine, calm, stoic presence. And when someone loses that, they don't just lose a person, they lose their anchor. That's why it hits so hard. Your silence isn't emptiness, it's a mirror. It reflects back everything they did, everything they took for granted, everything they thought they controlled. And now, with nothing left to mirror, they're forced to face themselves. And the image isn't flattering. They realize that while they were busy testing your patience, you were quietly testing their character. And when they failed that test, you didn't scold them, you didn't lecture, you simply vanished. And nothing haunts the human heart more than the kind of disappearance that comes without explanation. That's the real art of Stoic absence. It doesn't punish, it purifies. It doesn't scream, it clarifies. It's the quiet withdrawal that says, I've learned my lesson and you've shown me yours. The realization doesn't hit them when they see you happy again. It doesn't even hit when they see you moved on. It hits when they realize that your peace no longer includes them, and that your silence doesn't seek their attention anymore. That's when it breaks them. Because that's when they finally see that your presence was never weakness, it was grace, and they mistook grace for submission. Now, in the emptiness of your absence, they understand. You were the calm in the storm, the voice of reason in their chaos, the one who gave meaning to what they thought was control. And the moment they realize you're truly gone, the world they built on ego begins to crumble. So before we move into what happens next, how denial, regret, and longing start to take over, take a deep breath, because this part isn't about revenge. It's about recognition. It's about understanding your power. Now do this right now. Like this video, subscribe to Stoic Blessing, and comment down below. My silence speaks louder than my pain. Because when they finally realize you're gone, your silence becomes the echo that their mind can't escape. When they first begin to feel your absence, the mind doesn't accept it, it deflects it. Denial is the ego's first defense against loss. It's the lie we tell ourselves to avoid seeing the truth too soon. And in their mind, that lie sounds something like this. He's not really gone. He'll come back. He always does. That's the story they cling to, not because they believe it, but because they need to. Because facing the truth means facing their own behavior. And few people have the strength to sit with the silence they caused. At first, the ego feels confident. It tells them your distance is just another test. It tells them you're trying to make a point, trying to trigger a reaction. It whispers, he still cares. He's just pretending not to, and so they wait. But the silence stretches, a day, a week, a month. No message, no explanation. Just absence, and that's when the cracks begin to show. They'll scroll through old messages and convince themselves that the connection you shared couldn't have just ended. They'll reread the words you once said, the jokes, the memories, the late-night talks that once made them feel seen. And for a moment, they'll feel comfort in that nostalgia. But then, that comfort turns cold, because there's no new message waiting at the end. There's no, hey, I miss you. There's nothing. Just their own reflection staring back at them through the screen. That's the beginning of denial's collapse, because the ego feeds on response. It survives on proof of control. When you are still reacting, arguing, explaining, proving your side, it kept them comfortable. They could tell themselves, he's still here. I still matter. I still have power. But when you stopped feeding the ego, it began to starve. And starvation turns confidence into panic. They start asking mutual friends about you, not out of care, but out of fear. They start watching your social media, looking for signs of weakness. If you look happy, they'll convince themselves it's fake. If you look calm, they'll say it's an act. Because accepting your peace means accepting their failure, and the ego will fight that with everything it has. So they'll build stories to survive. He's just trying to make me jealous. He's just waiting for me to reach out first. He's hurt. That's why he's quiet. But deep down, they know the truth. You're not waiting. You're not acting. You're not pretending. You're done. And that realization terrifies them, because now they have to confront something they never thought they'd face. You were never the one who needed them. They needed you. That's the sting of denial. It delays the inevitable, but it can't erase it. The longer they resist the truth, the deeper it cuts when it arrives. And the truth always arrives, wrapped in silence. They'll start to sense that you're not coming back this time, that this isn't an emotional reaction, but a conscious decision. They'll remember the look in your eyes the last time you spoke, the calm before withdrawal, the stillness of a man who made peace with walking away, and the ego will finally start to fracture. But before it breaks, it lashes out. It will try to find fault in you. It will tell them he was too cold, too distant, too hard to understand. It will convince them that losing you was their choice, not their consequence. But even that story fades when the nights get quiet, because pride is loud in public, but in silence the truth always whispers louder. And the truth is this: The one who controls their emotions controls the narrative. Your silence rewrote the entire story. It took away their script, their role, their illusion of power. And now they're left trying to fill in the blanks of a story they no longer understand. That's the beauty of Stoic detachment. It forces others to face themselves. You didn't punish them. You simply stepped back, and nature took care of the rest. Denial will keep them warm for a little while, but it won't last. Because every ego eventually meets the one thing it can't manipulate: absence. If you've ever watched denial crumble beneath your silence, type this below right now: "My absence exposes the truth." Because denial can rewrite stories, but it can't silence reality, and reality always returns, carried on the weight of your peace. There's a moment in every story of loss when denial finally collapses, and in its place, the void begins. It doesn't arrive with warning. It creeps in quietly, like fog rolling into an empty city after a storm. They wake up one morning and feel it, not a pain, but an absence, not noise, but an echo. The messages they used to send are now drafts they never finish. The laughter they once forced feels hollow. The people they turn to for distraction start to irritate them. Because what they miss isn't a person, it's the energy, the depth, the stillness that came with your presence, the security that only someone calm, consistent and grounded could bring. The void is cruel because it doesn't announce itself. It just waits. It hides in the silence between notifications. It lingers in the pause after a song ends. It hums in the background of their thoughts. Everything they do reminds them of you, not because they want it to, but because they can't stop it. They'll try to fill that emptiness. They'll chase temporary distractions. They'll talk to people who feel shallow, even if they don't admit it. They'll scroll endlessly, looking for something to dull the quiet ache that keeps returning. But no matter how much noise they create, the void always wins. Because you can replace attention, but you can't replace energy. When you gave them your presence, you gave them something most people never learn to value until it's gone: peace. The kind of peace that's not loud, not performative, not demanding, just presence. The kind that doesn't need to be seen to be felt. And when that presence disappears, the silence it leaves behind doesn't just feel empty, it feels unnatural. That's what the void really is. The realization that what they thought was optional was actually essential. That the energy they dismissed so easily was the very thing that kept them balanced. Now they're left with themselves, and for many, that's the one person they never learned to face. So they start replaying memories, not the big moments, but the small ones. The way you listened when no one else did. The way your calm could steady their chaos. The way you stayed composed even when you were hurt. And those memories don't fade. They haunt. Because the mind doesn't crave what it lost. It craves what it can't replace. And as the void deepens, the mind begins to reach for comfort, but finds none. They scroll past your pictures, hoping to feel something familiar, but all they feel is distance. They check your social media, hoping to see a sign of weakness, but all they see is peace. And that peace hits harder than any argument ever could. Because peace is proof that they've lost influence. And influence is what the ego needs to survive. In that moment, they realize something chilling. You're not coming back. Not because you hate them, but because you've outgrown the need to be understood by them. You've built peace in silence, and once a man tastes that kind of calm, he never returns to chaos. And here's where the void turns heavy. Because it's no longer about you reaching out. It's about them realizing they can't reach you anymore. They'll think about calling. They'll type out messages they never send. They'll look for signs, symbols, reasons to believe you still care. But every time they find silence waiting on the other end, That silence speaks louder than words. That's the moment the void stops being external and starts living inside them. The absence of your voice becomes the voice in their head. Every place they go feels smaller. Every moment of solitude feels colder, because they've finally met the emptiness they once made you feel, and it doesn't leave easily. Your absence has become their shadow, always behind them, always reminding them, always whispering the truth they refused to hear when you were still there. So remember this, the void isn't punishment, it's reflection. It's the universe holding up a mirror and saying, this is what it feels like to lose something real. If you've ever watched someone who once dismissed your worth begin to drown in the silence you left behind, comment this below. They feel my absence more than they ever felt my presence, because once the void begins, nothing fills it but truth, and your silence is that truth. At first, they thought they were in control. When you went silent, when you pulled away, they mistook it for weakness. They told themselves, he's trying to make me miss him. They smiled to their friends and said, he'll come back. He always does. That's the ego, so certain of its influence, so blind to its fragility. But time is the great revealer, and time is always on the side of the Stoic. Because while pride needs reaction to survive, silence needs nothing. And as your silence continues, their confidence begins to erode, slowly, like stone under dripping water. It starts with irritation. They wonder why you haven't broken yet, why you haven't cracked like before. They test the waters, liking a post, sending a random message, trying to provoke a response. But when nothing comes, the irritation turns into confusion. Why isn't it working anymore? That confusion grows into anxiety, because control isn't lost in one blow. It slips away piece by piece, day by day, every time the silence remains unbroken. They start to feel it in their stomach, that quiet panic that whispers, what if he's really gone? And that thought, that's the one they can't handle. Because power is addictive, and losing power over someone who once gave it freely feels like withdrawal. Their mind becomes restless, reaching for a fix that no longer exists. The same silence that once felt like victory now feels like punishment. They're trapped in the emptiness they created, pacing inside it, unable to escape. This is the turning point, the moment when arrogance collapses under its own weight. The same pride that made them ignore your presence now suffocates them in your absence. They start to see your composure differently. What once looked like coldness now looks like strength. What once looked like distance now looks like discipline. What once looked like detachment now looks like peace, and peace is something they can't imitate. They begin to question everything. Did I push too far? Did he stop caring? Has he moved on? Their mind runs in circles because silence gives it no foothold. There's nothing to grab onto, nothing to control, no reaction to measure their worth by, and that loss of measurement drives them mad. When you stop reacting, they lose their sense of identity, because for so long they defined themselves by your response, your anger, your affection, your attention. Every reaction told them they still mattered. But now, there's nothing. Just the echo of their own noise fading into your stillness. That's the shift from power to panic. It's not loud, it's not obvious. It happens quietly, internally, like the slow crumbling of a structure you can't see until it finally collapses. And it always collapses. Because control built on ego can't survive in the presence of indifference. Your silence becomes the great equalizer. It turns their certainty into doubt, their pride into humility, their confidence into fear. And the longer you remain calm, the louder their mind becomes. They start to hear every unspoken truth you left behind, every moment they dismissed, every chance they wasted, every version of you they'll never get back. Now, they're the one checking the phone. They're the one staring at the screen, waiting for something that never comes. They're the one trying to distract themselves from the weight of their own thoughts. Because silence doesn't just create distance, it reverses gravity. What once revolved around them now revolves around you. But here's the irony. You didn't take their power. They handed it to you the moment they underestimated your peace. This is where you, the Stoic, must stay firm. Because this is the moment when your silence will be most tempting to break, when you'll feel the pull to speak, to explain, to show how far you've come. Don't. Let them feel the silence. Let them drown in the space they created. Because it's only in that stillness that truth can echo. They thought your voice was power, but it was your absence all along. If you've ever witnessed this shift, when the one who once ignored you begins to chase your silence, type this below. My peace turned their power into panic. Because in the end, silence doesn't take revenge, it restores balance. And when balance returns, illusion dies. Regret never arrives all at once. It creeps in quietly, like a ghost that sits at the edge of the bed long after midnight. At first, they mistake it for nostalgia, just harmless memories, innocent moments flickering through their mind. But it's not nostalgia, it's grief. Because they're not just remembering you, they're remembering who they were when you were still there. The first wave of regret is confusion. They start asking themselves questions they once laughed off. Why did I say that? Why did I push him away? Why did I think he'd always be there? The human mind is cruel in that way. It doesn't give you answers when it's too late. It gives you clarity, and clarity without a second chance feels like punishment. They begin replaying everything, every argument, every silence, every look they ignored. They remember how calm you stayed when they tried to provoke you, how patient you were when they gave you indifference, how consistent you remained when they withdrew affection. At the time, they saw that calm as weakness. They thought your patience was passivity. But now they understand. It wasn't weakness, it was restraint. It wasn't indecision, it was wisdom. And that realization burns, because once you understand someone's worth from a distance, that knowledge becomes a weight you can't put down. It stays with you. It shapes every thought, every memory, every comparison that follows. Now, regret starts to bloom into longing. But it's not longing for you, it's longing for the version of themselves that existed when they had access to your presence. You represented stability, patience, understanding, qualities they lacked, but absorbed through you. You were their mirror, reflecting back a version of them that looked better than they truly were. And when you left, so did that reflection. That's the cruelty of loss. You don't just lose the person, you lose the parts of yourself that existed only in their presence. And when they look in the mirror now, they see the truth, the cold truth, the one your absence forced them to face. The person they are without you isn't as composed, as grounded, as seen. So they start to reach for the past. They scroll through old pictures. They revisit old conversations. They look for signs, something, anything, to prove that maybe you still care. But all they find is stillness, the kind of stillness that tells them the story's already over. And that's when regret fully matures, when they realize that they can't fix what they broke. That no amount of, "I miss you," could undo the distance. That even if you answered, you wouldn't sound the same. Because absence doesn't just change the situation, it changes the soul. In that realization, they meet their reflection. Not the curated image the ego crafted, but the raw truth your silence exposes. They were careless, they were entitled, they were blind. And they'll want to run from that reflection. They'll distract themselves, bury themselves in attention, chase new people, new faces, new validation. But it never lasts, because the mirror follows them everywhere. It's not you haunting them, it's their own conscience, awakened by your absence. That's the mirror of regret. It doesn't show them who you are, it shows them who they became without you. And that image is what truly hurts. Here's the ironic part. While they're drowning in remorse, you've already found peace. You're not bitter, you're not waiting. You've accepted what was and detached from what isn't. You've transcended the need for revenge because your silence already delivered it, without malice, without effort, without noise. Regret for them is a storm, but for you, it's silence after thunder. You've become still, unmoved, and free. So remember this truth. The greatest punishment for those who played with your peace is not losing you. It's having to remember what it felt like to be in your presence, because nothing and no one will ever recreate it the same way again. If you've ever seen that look, the one where someone finally realizes the weight of what they lost, comment this below. My silence became their mirror, because that's what absence does. It doesn't chase revenge. It reflects truth. And truth, when seen too late, is the most painful reflection of all. Regret opens the door, but what comes next is war. Not between you and them, but inside them. A silent, endless battle between ego and truth. Pride says, stay quiet, don't reach out, you don't need him. Fear whispers, but what if he never comes back? Guilt says, you should apologize. And shame murmurs, he wouldn't listen even if you did. Every voice pulls in a different direction until their mind becomes noise, a battlefield of contradictions where no side can win. They'll try to rationalize it. He's stubborn, he's playing mind games, he wants me to chase. It's easier to believe that than to admit the truth, that you've moved on not out of spite, but out of evolution. They'll tell themselves stories to dull the sting, but stories can't silence silence. Days turn into weeks, and the weight builds. They check your profile more often than they admit. They scroll through every photo looking for clues, some change, some sign that you're still reachable. They wonder if you think of them. They wonder if you hate them. They wonder if you've already found someone who values what they overlooked. That wondering turns into obsession, but obsession cannot coexist with pride, so they oscillate. One day they swear they're done, the next they nearly type a message. Their fingers hover over your name, their mind rehearses what they'd say, something small, safe, casual. Hey, how have you been? But the stoic discipline you showed now lives in their imagination. They can almost feel your calm disapproval as they hesitate, delete the message, and put the phone down again. And that's what tortures them the most. The awareness that you wouldn't respond in the old way, that your voice, if they heard it again, would sound different, measured, detached, unbothered. Because absence has matured you, and they're still stuck in the version of the story where you needed closure. They start to realize the paradox. To regain their pride, they must stay silent, but to heal their guilt, they must reach out. Either choice hurts, and that's justice in its purest, quietest form. Every path they take now leads back to themselves. You, meanwhile, don't have to lift a finger. Your silence wages this war for you. It makes them confront everything you once tried to explain, and they refuse to hear. It forces them to sit in the discomfort they once handed you. Soon, exhaustion sets in. The internal conflict begins to drain them. They can't pretend not to care anymore, but they can't bring themselves to admit they do. They replay every opportunity they had to make things right, every moment they dismissed, every sign they ignored, and the realization hits like a weight they can't drop. They lost not just your attention, but your respect. And once respect is gone, nothing feels the same. They'll lie awake at night wondering what version of you exists now. They'll picture you at peace, reading, training, building, living in that quiet world they never thought you'd choose over them. They'll think, he really did it. He really let me go, and that thought burns deeper than any rejection ever could. Because the ego can fight attention. It can battle anger. It can feed off drama. But it cannot survive indifference. Your stillness has become the mirror and the punishment, the silence and the sermon. The internal conflict never ends cleanly. It just fades into acceptance. Not because they find peace, but because they realize you already have. If you've ever watched someone wrestle with their own pride while you stayed completely still, type this down below. My silence started the war they couldn't win. Because sometimes the loudest victory is the one fought entirely in someone else's mind. Every storm eventually runs out of thunder. After the noise of denial, the ache of regret, and the war of pride, there comes a strange calm. It doesn't mean they've made peace with losing you. It means the fight inside them has burned through every excuse. What's left behind is something they never expected to feel toward you again: respect. It starts subtly. They catch themselves thinking about how you never argued back, how you never begged for understanding, how you never broke the silence to defend your worth. That quiet dignity they once mistook for indifference begins to look like strength. Because when their own emotions spun out of control, yours never did. You stayed centered while they lost balance. You stayed grounded while they chased noise. And now, in hindsight, they see the difference between someone who reacts and someone who responds. Respect is born in comparison. Every person they meet after you feels like a reflection in broken glass, sharp, distorted, temporary. The conversations feel shallow, the validation feels hollow, the attention feels desperate. And through all of it, they remember your restraint, the way you could speak volumes without saying a word, the way your energy commanded space without demanding it. That's when admiration creeps in. Not the romantic kind, the existential kind. The kind that makes them question why they ever played games with someone who had already mastered self-control. Because real power is quiet, and you embodied that. They begin to replay the last time they saw you, the calm in your face, the ease in your tone, the absence of need. They didn't realize it then, but that was the moment they lost their hold on you. Now they see it clearly. They see the wisdom in every boundary you set, the grace in every silence you held, the courage in every step you took away. They might even speak about you differently now. They'll tell friends, "He was different. He didn't argue. He just left." They'll say it with a mix of guilt and awe, because deep down they understand that walking away without resentment requires a kind of strength most never develop. You became proof that self-respect isn't loud, it's disciplined. And here's the paradox of absence. When respect replaces control, connection changes form. They no longer crave to own your attention. They crave to understand your calm. They wonder how you did it, how you detached without hatred, how you stayed kind without staying available, how you let go without leaving pieces of yourself behind. They start to realize that your silence wasn't avoidance, it was mastery. This is what the Stoics meant by virtue, power over the self. You didn't win by dominating someone else, you won by mastering yourself. You didn't walk away to hurt them, you walked away to heal. You didn't stay silent to punish, you stayed silent to protect. And that understanding changes everything. The same person who once saw you as replaceable now measures everyone else by your standard. That's the quiet legacy of discipline. It leaves an imprint on the ones who misunderstood it. Respect doesn't arrive with applause. It arrives in whispers, in late-night thoughts, in the moments when they need the steadiness you once gave so easily. And when they finally feel that ache, they don't reach out, they reflect. Because some silences are too sacred to disturb. That's how respect is born. From the ashes of ego, from the clarity of absence, from the calm of the man who never broke character. If you've ever felt this shift, if someone once doubted your worth and later bowed to your peace, type this below right now. My silence earned their respect. Because the Stoic man doesn't demand reverence, he inspires it quietly, by mastering himself when everyone else loses control. Respect is quiet, but after it comes something heavier, realization. Because once the noise of ego fades and the admiration for your calm settles, they're left alone with the one thing they can't escape, the weight of your absence. At first, it feels like background static. They notice it only in small moments, the pause before sleep, the silence on the drive home, the space beside them that used to hold your presence. But as days fold into weeks, that space begins to feel alive. It hums with everything that's missing, your steadiness, your patience, your grounded energy. They start to sense you everywhere, yet nowhere, in a scent that passes on the street, in a phrase someone says, in a piece of music that once played when things still felt certain. And each reminder lands differently now. It doesn't spark anger, it sparks ache. Because memories no longer bring warmth, they bring contrast. The contrast between the peace you embodied and the restlessness that surrounds them now. That's the weight of absence. It isn't the loss of contact, it's the loss of gravity. When you were present, you anchored their chaos without even trying. You were the steady point in a spinning world. Without you, everything tilts. They feel it in the way conversations drift, how laughter ends too quickly, how every new connection feels temporary. They'll try to lighten that weight. They'll tell themselves they're fine. They'll drown it out with distractions, with people who talk louder, move faster, promise more. But distraction is noise, and noise can't fill silence. It only delays it. When the noise fades, the silence is still there, waiting patiently like you once did. And this time, the silence doesn't comfort them. It confronts them. It reminds them of how rare true presence is. It shows them that attention isn't the same as energy, and that having people around isn't the same as being understood. They finally see that what you offered wasn't ordinary. It was sacred. That realization hits hardest at night. When there's no one to perform for, no mask to wear, no story to tell. That's when the emptiness grows heavy enough to feel physical. That's when your absence becomes a presence in its own right, one they can't argue with, one they can't escape, one that humbles them in silence. And yet, in that pain, a strange gratitude forms, because somewhere deep inside, they know they needed this lesson. They needed to lose the peace they took for granted to finally understand its worth. They needed to face the void to realize it was never you who made them whole. It was the reflection of themselves that your steadiness revealed. That's what absence does to those who once misunderstood presence. It teaches them through emptiness what they refused to learn through grace. They'll carry that lesson quietly. They might never tell you, they might never find the words, but they'll know. They'll know that your silence wasn't punishment. It was the weight of truth. And truth, once felt, never leaves. So remember this. When your absence begins to feel heavy in someone else's world, it's not because you vanished. It's because your presence was real. If you understand this, if you've ever watched someone finally feel the gravity of your silence, type this below right now. My absence carries weight. Because a Stoic man doesn't haunt people with bitterness, he teaches them through the quiet permanence of peace. At some point, their storm stops mattering. The noise, the speculation, the guilt, it all fades into the background. Because while they were busy drowning in your absence, you were learning to breathe in silence. You found something they never expected you to find without them: peace. Not the kind that comes from distraction or validation or closure. The kind that comes from discipline, from mastering your mind when everything in you wanted to react. From sitting with the ache until it turned into clarity, from choosing not to chase what disrespected your calm. The Stoic man doesn't find peace by avoiding pain. He finds it by walking straight through it, quietly, deliberately, without complaint. You faced the void they left, and you filled it with growth. You learned to build yourself from stillness, not from noise. In the beginning, silence was heavy. It pressed against your chest, made the nights longer, the mornings slower. You wanted to break it, to explain, to be understood. But something in you whispered, "Wait." And in that waiting, you began to transform. You started reading more, training more, moving with purpose again. You noticed the world without distraction, the sound of rain, the feel of cold air in your lungs, the simplicity of being unseen. You stopped seeking to be heard and started learning to listen, to yourself, to your instincts, to life itself. That's when peace found you, not as a reward, but as a byproduct of control. Control over your emotions, control over your impulses, control over your need to prove anything to anyone. Now you understand something sacred. Peace is not given, it's earned. It's the byproduct of letting go of things that were never yours to carry, of realizing that closure isn't something someone gives you, it's something you decide to create through acceptance. The Stoic mind knows this truth deeply, that freedom begins where reaction ends. You no longer need to fight for understanding because you've stopped needing it. You've stopped trying to rewrite other people's perceptions of you. You've stopped explaining your silence to those who never listened to your words. And in that detachment, your power multiplied. Now, when you think of them, there's no anger, only distance. When their name crosses your mind, there's no reaction, only stillness. When their energy returns to test your calm, you smile inwardly, because you know the truth. What disturbed you once no longer has the strength to move you. That's the highest form of strength, to be unshakable, to no longer swing between hope and disappointment, to no longer base your worth on being chosen, to walk through solitude not as punishment, but as privilege. You've reached the point where peace feels better than attention, where silence feels safer than validation, where solitude feels stronger than compromise. You've outgrown the need to prove you've moved on, because the way you live now makes it obvious. This is what the Stoic man discovers, that the calm you find in solitude is more intoxicating than any chaos disguised as love. You no longer need to be seen, because you've learned to see yourself clearly. And that's what makes your peace so powerful. It's not fragile, it's not conditional, it's not dependent on who stays or who leaves. It's yours, untouchable, self-sustaining, earned in silence and guarded with discipline. So when they think of you now, they'll sense that difference. They'll feel it in the way you no longer move toward them, in the way your eyes carry distance without bitterness, in the way your energy says, "I've already forgiven you, but I've also outgrown you." That's the Stoic's peace, the kind that doesn't need an ending to feel complete. If you've ever reached this level of calm, where your silence no longer hurts but heals, comment this below right now: "Peace is my power." Because once a man becomes peace itself, he can never be controlled again. And now, this is the part they never imagined. The part where your silence becomes permanent. The part where you no longer look back. The part where they realize the version of you they once knew no longer exists. They thought your distance was temporary, that you'd circle back like before, that your heart still lived in the same place they left it. But absence changes everything. Time doesn't just heal, it evolves. And while they were still talking to your ghost, you were busy building your rebirth. They finally see it now, that the same silence they once laughed at was never weakness. It was warning. It was you quietly saying, "I'm done repeating lessons you refuse to learn." You didn't disappear to hurt them. You disappeared to heal, to protect your mind, your dignity, your spirit, to reclaim your power from the noise that drained it. Because the truth is this: walking away is not an act of cruelty, it's an act of courage. It's what happens when love for your peace outweighs your attachment to chaos. When they think of you now, they won't remember the arguments or the explanations. They'll remember the stillness, the quiet moments when you simply stopped reacting. Because silence is the final teacher. It delivers the lesson words never could. They'll remember your calm like a mirror that showed them who they really were. And for the rest of their life, every person they meet will be compared to that silence, to that energy that didn't need to prove its worth. And as for you, you've changed. You're not the same man who once waited for understanding. You've grown quieter, sharper, lighter. You've learned that peace isn't found in getting what you want. It's found in not needing it anymore. Now, you walk with purpose. You speak less, but mean more. You move alone, but never feel lonely. You've learned to see detachment not as loss, but as liberation. You no longer chase what's fleeting. You build what's eternal: discipline, calm, and truth. That's the essence of the Stoic path. It's not about revenge. It's not about winning. It's about returning to yourself. So as they finally feel the full weight of your absence, as they replay every memory trying to understand where it all went wrong, remember this: you don't need them to see your worth anymore. You've already proven it to yourself. That's the ultimate power: to walk away without anger, to stay silent without resentment, and to forgive without returning. Now take a deep breath and let the silence speak for you. Because your silence is not emptiness, it's evidence. Evidence that you survived, that you evolved, that you became the man who no longer needs to explain his peace. If you felt this message, if you've lived this truth, do this right now. Like this video, subscribe to Stoic Blessing, and comment down below, "I am a Stoic soldier." Because this is more than a video, it's a reflection of who you've become. A man who doesn't chase validation, a man who commands silence, a man who walks alone, but never without purpose. You've left the noise behind, you've stepped into the quiet, and in that quiet, you've become untouchable.